Documentaries cover a wide range of subjects, such as nature, historical events, famous people, and classic cars, for example. But some of these films are far darker than most, as they deal with infamous crimes that were committed years ago and offer a unique perspective into the finer details of those investigations. Number 10. A documentary called The Barefoot Bandit, which was created by director Carly Bodmer, covers the life and crimes committed by Colton Harris Moore, who originally hails from northern Washington. During his crime spree, he posted selfies online and started amassing a huge following, but he was eventually made to face the long arm of the law. From an early age, Harris Moore took an interest in planes, and according to some, it became somewhat of an obsession, even when he was still in elementary school. His life's ambition was to become a pilot one day, but he knew that he would have to work extra hard to achieve that dream, since his family didn't have a lot of money, and his father was out of his life for most of his childhood, since he was in prison and had an illegal substance addiction. To make matters worse, his mother had a drinking problem, and Harris Moore started getting into trouble with the law when he was just 12 years old, when he was convicted of being in possession of stolen property. When he was convicted of 3 more crimes over the following year, he was sent for evaluation and diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, depression, and intermittent explosive disorder. He was eventually sent to the Griffin Home Residential Treatment Center, but decided to abscond in 2008, and an arrest warrant was issued. He then stole a car and traveled to Camano Island, where he started breaking into houses for food and valuables to sell. His first taste of fame as a wanted fugitive came when he stole a car and was pursued by the police. He managed to avoid arrest by jumping out of the vehicle and fleeing into the woods. And in the car, investigators found several stolen items, including credit cards, a camera, and cell phones. The media started following his story, and before long, Harris Moore was dubbed the Barefoot Bandit, due to the fact that he rarely wore shoes while committing his crimes. His guilt was never in doubt, since he'd used the stolen camera to take selfies that were spread online by the press and his now growing fan base. Realizing that the law was closing in on him, Harris Moore left Camano Island via a stolen boat and relocated to Orcas Island. Here, he committed a string of burglaries and had to flee once again, but this time he decided against using a boat. Thanks to his obsession with planes, he'd studied many airplane manuals, and in doing so, taught himself how to fly. On this occasion, he made it off the island after stealing a Cessna 182 airplane. He made an emergency landing on the Yakima Indian Reservation, once again evading capture. His crime spree only continued from there. He ended up stealing countless cars and never remained in the same area for too long. He was being sought in Washington, Reno, and Sacramento, and the police upped their investigation after he broke into a patrol car and stole police equipment, including a firearm. He stole 3 more planes, another boat, and committed many more robberies, but in 2010, his adventure finally came to an end at Harbor Island in the Bahamas after crashing a plane there. He was arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison. He then became reclusive, removed all his social media profiles, and has rarely been seen in public. Number 9. The subject of capital punishment is an extremely divisive one. Some people believe that the death penalty will deter criminals from carrying out serious crimes, while others feel that no one has the right to decide whether someone should live or not. This is the focus of the Werner Herzog documentary Into the Abyss, which was released in November of 2011. It also details the case of a crime that was committed by 2 men, Michael Perry and Jason Burkett, in Texas in 2001. From a young age, Perry was a handful for his adoptive parents. They struggled to control him and eventually decided to send him to the Florida Everglades, where he attended counseling sessions. When this didn't work, he was sent to reform school, but he was then diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and conduct disorder. He would steal from his parents, break into houses, and he even stole the family car on one occasion and ended up crashing it. When he turned 18, he set out on his own, and despite the best efforts of his parents, his behavior had seen no improvement whatsoever. He would later admit that they gave him endless opportunities to fix his life, and that he chose to rebel instead. He ended up living on the streets of San Diego, and he developed an illegal substance addiction. He would eventually move back home and was welcomed by his parents, but he continued committing crimes. As for Birgit, he didn't have the best start to life either. His mother was an addict who used while she was pregnant, and her children were forced to fend for themselves, and they survived on food stamps, and on many occasions suffered abuse at the hands of their father. And somewhere along the line, Perry and Birgit met, and they became fast friends. Then, on the 24th of October, 2001, they made the decision that changed their lives forever. They knew that a nurse, Sandra Stotler, owned a red Camaro, and they wanted to feel what it would be like to drive it. They broke into her house, and in her kitchen, Perry produced a firearm and ended her life. This was a particularly callous crime, since the two men and Sandra knew each other. They disposed of her body in Crater Lake, and then returned to her house to steal her car. But while they were there, her son and one of his friends arrived. The two men told them that there had been a hunting accident in the nearby woods, and after taking them into the woods, they ended both of their lives. They returned to the house in Sandra's son's SUV, stole Sandra's Camaro, and fled. They were then seen at a bar, each with a new vehicle, and explained that they'd won the lottery. 6 days later, they were involved in a high-speed chase with the police and were ultimately taken into custody. Perry confessed to ending Sandra's life and told investigators where to look for the other two victims. He would later retract his confession, stating that he'd been coerced, and then claimed that he was in police custody at the time that the attack took place. The pair then turned on each other, but this did little to change the outcome of their cases, as both Perry and Birgit were found guilty. Birgit received a life sentence, while Perry was sentenced to be executed. Number 8. The subject matter of some documentaries seems almost too outlandish to be true, and the case of Frederick Borden, which is detailed in the documentary The Imposter, certainly fits that description. This strange and unnerving case started on the 3rd of May 2005 when a member of the public in Orthez, France contacted the police. He reported that he'd found a young boy called Francisco Hernandez walking around alone at a train station, and that he clearly needed help. He seemed lost and only had his ID and a cell phone on him. He seemed shy, keeping his face covered with a muffler and a baseball cap, and had clearly been through an ordeal. But before the authorities could track him down, the boy went to a welfare office where he explained his situation. He stated that his entire family had lost their lives in a car accident in Spain. He survived but was left alone in a coma for weeks, and after he was fit to be released, he was sent to live with his uncle. But there, his uncle became abusive, and Francisco decided to relocate to France, where he was then found. He was housed at a shelter in Pau, where he explained that he was self-conscious about his body, which he claimed was covered in scars and burn marks from the accident. Hence, he was given his own room so that he wouldn't need to change in front of the other boys at the shelter. He started attending the notorious Jean Monnet College, where he was the only student allowed to wear a hat, again due to his scars. Many staff members at the school took a special interest in Francisco, since he'd suffered such trauma, and wouldn't allow anyone, including medical staff, to examine him. He soon proved to be a very good student, and he became friends with Rafael Pessoa de Almeida, who served as his tutor. Rafael found it strange that Francisco's call log and contacts on his cell phone were protected by a password, but he didn't press the issue. He soon became one of the most popular children in the school, and even performed a dance number to a Michael Jackson song in front of his class. He seemed to be coming out of his shell, but in June of that year, his case would take an unprecedented turn. A school administrator came rushing into the school's principal's office and stated that she had seen a news story about a Frenchman named Frederick Borden, who was sought for identity theft. Not only was he a 30-year-old con man, but he was also known to impersonate children, and she realized that he and Francisco looked almost identical. He was called to the office, where officers took him into custody, and when his hat was removed, it became clear he had no scars on his head as he had claimed, and to make matters worse, he was balding. While being interviewed, he revealed that he'd been impersonating children for 15 years because he didn't want to grow up. He'd been examined by doctors in the past, none of whom ever realized he was an adult. Number 7. Being a member of an organized crime family has to be a very stressful life, but serving as their hitman must be even more anxiety-inducing. This is the life that Richard Kuklinski chose, and his life and crimes are discussed in the documentary The Iceman Confesses: Secrets of a Mafia Hitman. Kuklinski's problems started at home when he was still young, when both his parents started becoming violent against him and his siblings. He dropped out of school after completing the 8th grade and then started a life of crime. He became a bootlegger and soon married a woman named Barbara Pedrisi, who had no idea that he was a career criminal until after his arrest. He told her that he was a businessman, and neither Barbara nor their children ever suspected otherwise. Due to his bootlegging activities, he caught the attention of the Gambino family, but he's since claimed to have worked with several other crime families. These include the De Cavallantes and Genoveses. He started carrying out hits, the first of which was carried out in 1980 when he met with George Malabend, who wanted to sell him a few videotapes. Kuklinski ended his life and placed his remains in a barrel. In another videotape meeting that went awry, he ended the life of Louis Mazgay in 1981, and his remains were only discovered more than a year later. Kuklinski was named the Iceman thanks to this case, when it was found that Mazgay's remains had been frozen and that ice crystals were present in his body. But Kuklinski thought nothing of attacking his own colleagues, the first of which was Gary Smith, a member of his own burglary gang. Kuklinski ended his life via poisoning and strangulation before hiding his body under a bed in a motel. The second was also a member of this gang, Daniel Deppner, who was also found to have been poisoned and who was not found for a year after his demise. He then ended the life of Paul Hoffman, a customer of Kuklinski's, who wanted to buy prescription medication from him. By this time, investigators were hot on his heels, and they devised a plan to uncover his crimes. He was duped into believing that an undercover federal agent was a customer who wanted to order a hit, and when Kuklinski agreed, he was taken into custody. He was charged with ending the lives of Smith, Deppner, Malaband, Mazgay, and Peter Calabro, a New York City police officer. He claimed to have ended the lives of at least 100 people, but this was never proven, and he was ultimately sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms behind bars. Number 6. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder that can wreak havoc not only on the lives of those who suffer from it, but also on those close to them. With the proper medication, it can be controlled, but in the case of Jonathan Cowett, whose mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, it changed his life forever. The events during this time in his life are presented in a documentary called Tarnation, which was produced by Cowett himself. It details the events of his childhood, which was not a happy one, and the hardships that he had to go through while living with his mentally ill mother. When Cowett was 12 years old, a friend of his mother's, who was a seller of illegal substances, gave him a substance to smoke, but unbeknownst to Cowett, it was laced with much stronger substances, and he had to be taken to the hospital. He was then told that he'd been diagnosed with dissociative disorder, and his life was completely changed from that point forward. He started feeling separated from the world around him, and a year later, he started sneaking into clubs while disguised as a female. He felt that every aspect of his life was like being in a movie, and he started filming strange horror films, which he and a friend recorded with a Super 8 camera. His situation was further exacerbated by the fact that he was a homosexual and living in Texas, where during that time, it was seen as unacceptable. Cowett's mother, Renee, also had a troubled childhood. Her life changed forever when she was just 12 years old after falling off her family's house's roof. During the accident, a nerve in her leg became damaged, and as a result, she lost the use of both legs. Believing that it was all in her mind, Her parents sent her to undergo electroshock therapy for 2 years, and by the time that her treatment was complete, she developed not only schizophrenia, but also bipolar disorder. Her parents were then told that the damage to her legs was very real, and that she would have recovered without treatment anyway, but by this time the damage had been done. Thanks to her mental disorders, she would spend decades in and out of medical facilities, and eventually she and Cowett became homeless. During this time, she witnessed Rene being assaulted, and it brought back memories of his time in foster care, when he was repeatedly assaulted by the family with whom he was placed. For more than 2 decades, he spent his time recording footage with his Super 8 camera, and much of this footage was used in his documentary, along with photos of his family. His favorite genre of film was horror, and whenever he watched a movie, he would gather his markers and paper, which were bought for him by his grandfather, and sketch out every scene that he could remember. Thus started his love for filmmaking, which provided him with the stability that he never had in his life as a child. As the years went by, Rene and his grandparents got older, and he ended up caring for them. He eventually decided to create Tarnation for a New York Film Festival on a budget of just over $200. The film became a huge success after it made an impression on a few directors, and soon it was being screened on the festival circuit. His career as a director was a success, and he managed to achieve his goal with Tarnation, which was to show Hollywood's uncaring nature towards those who suffer from mental illnesses. Number 5. Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky's 1992 debut documentary, Brother's Keeper, focused on a 1990 murder case and subsequent bizarre trial in Munnsville, New York. It introduced the 4 isolated Ward brothers, Bill, Delbert, Roscoe, and Lyman, who grew up on a dairy farm without electricity or running water. By 1990, Bill, then 64, was severely ill with debilitating headaches and stomach pains, rapidly losing weight. On June 6th, Bill was found deceased. Police suspected his illiterate 59-year-old brother, Delbert, had smothered Bill with a pillow to end his suffering. Delbert was coerced into signing a 4-page confession that he couldn't even read, but later he retracted that confession. Despite the confession, the defense argued Delbert's illiteracy made the confession invalid. So Delbert took the stand, asserting his closeness to Bill and denying harming him. The local community strongly supported Delbert, holding fundraisers for his bail and defense. The trial became national news, attracting celebrity attention. Berlinger and Sinofsky filmed the trial footage for the documentary. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a not guilty verdict, delighting Delbert's supporters. He left the court planning a celebration with his brothers. Delbert became a minor celebrity himself until his death in 1998. His 2 remaining brothers passed away in 2007, but the Ward family remains known for the case that nearly imprisoned an innocent man. Number 4. The case involving NFL football player Pat Tillman, who later became an Army Ranger, is one that contains many twists and turns, all of which are covered in the documentary The Tillman Story, which was directed by Amir Bar-Lev and narrated by Josh Brolin. Tillman's football career started at Arizona State University, after which he started playing for the Arizona Cardinals NFL team. He made quite an impression in his rookie year, besting the record for the most tackles in a season by a rookie. But in 2002, he and his brother decided to join the Army, after which Pat was sent to Iraq. 2 years into his military service, he was sent to Afghanistan, and on the 22nd of April 2004, he was part of a platoon that was stationed in that country's southeastern mountains. An armored vehicle in the trailing part of his platoon was attacked by enemies, and in mere moments, chaos erupted. Several soldiers positioned in a Humvee decided to fire back, but ended up firing at Pat and his fellow Rangers. Pat was struck and unfortunately lost his life along with another soldier. His family was told that his life was ended during an ambush by the Taliban and that he had fought bravely before he was fatally struck. He was awarded the Silver Star for his heroism, but the truth of what happened that day would eventually be revealed, despite the best efforts of the military and the US government to cover it up. It came to light that before the ambush started, Pat's platoon had approached a canyon in the mountains, and they immediately knew that it was the perfect place for the enemy to lie in wait. This was well known to the commanding officers who were present, who then proceeded to make a baffling decision. They ordered the platoon to split up and told the front section to drive through the canyon. Upon doing so, the enemy opened fire, and thanks to the ensuing friendly fire, Pat was struck in the forehead 3 times. But it would later be revealed that the friendly fire started not with the inexperienced soldiers, but with the platoon leader. Pat was fighting next to an Afghan militia fighter who, despite donning an American uniform, was mistaken by the platoon leader as an enemy soldier. He raised his weapon at the man and opened fire, ending his life and resulting in the wild discharge of firearms towards Pat and half of the platoon. It was then realized that Pat lost his life to friendly fire, and the cover-up immediately started. His uniform and weapons were never sent back to the US to be analyzed, and it should be noted that the Silver Star is never presented to a soldier who lost his life to friendly fire. His clothes and body armor were destroyed, and his weapons were never recovered. The military then told his family that Pat had been struck by fire from members of the Taliban. During subsequent investigations, it was discovered that high-ranking officials knew that Pat's life was ended by fellow soldiers, and that General Stanley McChrystal intentionally decided to deceive his family by awarding him the Silver Star. The soldier who fired the weapon that ended Pat's life was never identified, despite several others coming forward to state that thanks to the ballistic work, his identity was known to the military. But it was decided that the entire platoon was at fault, and hence that particular soldier's name was never made public. Number 3. The documentary Team Foxcatcher focuses on John DuPont, a wealthy philanthropist and amateur freestyle wrestling supporter, who created the Team Foxcatcher wrestling team at his estate in Newton Square, Pennsylvania. He was also interested in other types of sports, and the 1965 U.S. Pentathlon Championship was held at this same estate. He would then go on to become a manager for the 1976 Montreal Olympic Pentathlon team, and it was only in the 1980s that his focus shifted to wrestling. He became the head coach of Villanova University's wrestling team, after which he designed and constructed a training facility at his estate, which had been renamed Foxcatcher Farm. This saw the creation of Team Foxcatcher, one member of which was Mark Schultz, a former Olympic champion. Mark's brother Dave was appointed as head coach of the team, but he was also training for the 1996 Olympic Games. But DuPont's life started to take an unfortunate turn when he started drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He would lose his temper for no apparent reason and had started collecting firearms, which was a bad combination. He was under the illusion that he himself was a champion wrestler, and anyone who disagreed with him was soon met by his explosive temper. According to those who knew him at the time, an already eccentric DuPont was growing increasingly paranoid. Many of the wrestlers on the estate considered leaving, but decided to stay since they were learning a lot from Dave, who was seen as a wrestling legend. After DuPont's mother passed away, his mental state only deteriorated further, and conditions at the farm became unbearable. He started pointing out Disney cartoon characters that he could see on the property, but that were not there. He also stated that the trees surrounding the house were uprooting themselves, after which they would walk around the grounds for reasons unknown. At one point, he became convinced that a flock of geese was conspiring against him using black magic, and he fired at them with one of his many weapons. Furthermore, the wrestlers were forbidden from using treadmills in the boxing gym because he believed that they could be used to turn back time. He believed that he was being watched by what he called enemies, and he hired extra security to patrol the estate grounds. His crumbling mental health would take a fatal turn on the 26th of January, 1996, when DuPont asked his security consultant to take him to Dave's house. The consultant did as he was asked, but became very nervous upon realizing that DuPont had a firearm with him. They arrived at the house, and according to reports, Dave greeted them warmly, but DuPont suddenly started screaming at Dave, asking him if he had a problem with him. Before Dave could answer, DuPont produced the firearm, pointed it at him, and fired, ending his life on the spot. The consultant produced his own weapon and trained on DuPont, who calmly got back into the vehicle. He then drove back to the estate and locked himself inside. His wife Nancy called 911 and stated outright that DuPont had lost his mind. It took 2 days to convince him to come out of the house, but when he found the building to be too cold, he handed himself over to the awaiting police. His defense of insanity was rejected, and he was sentenced to 13 to 30 years in prison, where he passed away in 2010. Number 2. The documentary Snowtown is not for the faint of heart. It's been described as unwatchable by many viewers, but not because of a lack of talent from its director, Justin Kurzel, but thanks to the subject matter. It explains and recreates a series of fatal attacks carried out by 4 men: John Bunting, Robert Wagner, James Vlasakis, and Mark Hayden, who was found guilty to a lesser degree. The documentary references the South Australian town where these crimes occurred. The case began on May 20th, 1999, when police found the remains of 8 people in plastic barrels stored in a disused bank vault. The attacks were carried out by Robert Bunting, the leader, James Wagner, and Mark Vlasakis. Bunting ordered the attacks due to his hatred of certain people, including family members of the group. Bunting and Wagner targeted and abducted people with mental and physical disabilities. They subjected them to maltreatment, often shown graphically in the film, making viewers uneasy. Bunting's motives were likely to satisfy his need for violence, often choosing victims randomly or based on unproven suspicions. A forensic psychiatrist suggested Bunting was a psychopath who enjoyed his victims' suffering, forcing them to call him Master, God, or Lord Sir. Suspicion fell on Bunting and his associates in 1997 after Elizabeth Hayden inexplicably disappeared. The investigation led to the discovery of the bank vault barrels and 2 more victims in Bunting's backyard. Bunting, Wagner, and Hayden were arrested, and Vlasakis was arrested shortly after. What followed was the longest trial in South Australia's history at that time. 12 victims were identified. Bunting was charged with 11 murders and received 11 consecutive life sentences without parole. Wagner was charged with 10 counts and received 10 life sentences. Vlasakis pleaded guilty to 3 and received 4 life sentences. Hayden admitted to concealing 2 sets of remains, but was convicted of aiding in the disposal of 5 and was sentenced to 25 years. Court orders suppressed the case details until 2011, when director Justin Kurzel requested their release for his documentary. The horrific nature of the crimes prompted Snowtown residents to consider changing the town's name to Rosetown, an idea rejected due to a subsequent rise in dark tourism. Number 1. Online dating can be a very daunting experience that often ends in disaster, but no one could have predicted the events that are covered in the documentary Lover, Stalker, Killer, which was created by Sam Hopkinson. It focuses on the case of Dave Krupa, who moved to Omaha in 2012 after his relationship with his longtime girlfriend, Amy Flora, came to an end. He decided to turn over a new leaf and accepted a job offer as an auto repair shop manager in Omaha. Having not dated anyone new for a long time, he decided to join the online dating site called Plenty of Fish, and before long he got a message from a woman named Shanna Elizabeth Gullier, or Liz for short. They decided to meet up in person, and they seemed to hit it off, both being single parents with similar interests. They went on a few more dates, though Dave made it clear that he was not interested in an exclusive relationship. About 6 months later, he met Carrie Farver when she walked into the repair shop. He was instantly attracted to her, and they started talking. He decided to ask Carrie out on a date, and she agreed, but that decision would prove fatal. Their first date went well, but Carrie then made it clear that she wasn't interested in a serious relationship while in Dave's apartment, and this suited Dave well. When the date was over, Carrie left the apartment, and in the outside hallway, she ran into Shanna, who had arrived uninvited. Carrie would end up staying at Dave's apartment on several occasions since her office was located close by, and they soon became very close. On the 13th of November, 2012, She remained in the apartment when Dave went to work, and they made plans to spend some time together later that evening. While at work, he became concerned when he received a text from Carrie in which she stated that she wanted to move in with him, something she'd never expressed any interest in. When he replied that he thought it was a bad idea, his phone was inundated with texts in which Carrie told him she hated him and that she never wanted to see him again since she'd met someone else anyway. It would only be 2 days later that he heard from her again. This time, she stated that David ruined her life, that he was a bad person and that she hated him. It would later come to light that Carrie was on prescribed medication for bipolar disorder. Her mother, Nancy, was taken aback when she received a message from Carrie, in which she stated that she decided to take a job in Kansas, which seemed extremely unlikely. Carrie could not be contacted, and she was reported as missing, but the messages to Dave's phone kept coming, and she'd started to mention Shanna, whose garage was soon vandalized. During the resulting investigation, Shanna's phone was analyzed, and it would come to light that she was the one sending these harassing messages while pretending to be Carrie. They also found an email in which she posed as David's previous girlfriend, and in which she admitted to ending Carrie's life. Further evidence that was found proved Shanna had indeed ended Carrie's life, and despite Carrie's remains never being found, Shanna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.